Hey, everybody, and thank you so much for joining in on this live virtual guest speaker experience. I'm joined today by Dan Sheeks. Dan is the author of First to a Million. This is a workbook and book for teens that's going to help guide you through the steps and the stages of going from wherever you are starting to how do you build wealth. So here's what the book looks like in case you are wondering. So First to a Million, achieving early financial independence, and a teen's guide for that. But besides that, Dan has a really vast a range of experience that we're going to talk about, and he's going to bring to the forum today. But the focus for today is this ultimate money hack for teens. And it's a little mysterious. It's a little bit of a clickbaity title. So I'm really excited to get in there and see what that is about. But Dan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Rob.
All right. So for all of you classrooms that are watching, hopefully your teacher is sharing this up on the screen and they are the ones with the laptop. If you have questions, make sure you communicate it to your teacher so they can put it into the Q&A section of the webinar. So teachers or educators, whoever is monitoring the screen, at the very bottom, you'll see a chat feature and also a Q&A feature. Feel free to put questions in there at any point, and we will try and address them either during the call or at the Q&A section at the end. I did send out a reflection document, which is a Google Doc, to all educators or people who register for the event. You'll find that on the email that went out before and also after the event if you need to locate it. At the very end, I want to draw attention to there's two resources that Dan has given us. One is the Ultimate Money Hack for Teens. It's a quick guide, and then one is a sample contract. And both of those are hyperlinks, so you can open those up and see a couple of the documents that we're going to be talking about today. But how we're going to start this is Dan and I are going to have a little bit of a conversation about this Ultimate Money Hack for Teens, and then we'll have a Q&A section at the end. So questions from students for Dan about this Ultimate Money Hack or anything else that has popped up that you're really curious about. All right. So Dan, before we start, I saw on your branding that you have this thing called Sheik's Freaks. It's like founder of Sheik's Freaks. And I'm like, this is a really interesting name for something. Normally freaks is not something you would consider a positive word, but you've taken it, you've owned it. And besides it rhyming with your last name, tell us more about what is a Sheik's Freak.
Yeah, sure. A Sheik's Freak is, in a nutshell, it's someone young, and I like to say Gen Z, so 15 to 25, someone young who is super interested in maximizing their financial future. So in this scenario, any student who's in a personal finance class that is really, really into what they're learning, and they want to use the strategies now. They want to build wealth, start building wealth now. It's an online community where I bring together young people who are like that, and that's not normal. Most young people, they might be interested, but they're not super motivated to maximize it today, and that's okay. But since that is the exceptional or the abnormal student, I call them freaks in a good way. So Sheik's Freaks is a community for young people who want to connect with other young people who are very interested in making smart money choices starting now.
Okay, so if you joined us for one of the previous guest speakers who's been a part of this virtual series, his name is Vincent Puglisi, and he talked about the wealth of connection. And this idea that if you want to achieve any goal in life, one of the things that you can do is start surrounding yourself with other people who are on the same path as you or who have already done it. And Jim Rohn has a famous quote as well, that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So this idea that if you want to do better with finances, you want to achieve this first to a million status, you want financial independence. One of the ways to do that is to start surrounding yourself with other people who are also trying to achieve financial independence or who have already done it. So you will be one of the people that is well on the path to financial independence. And then this group, the Sheik's Freaks group, is made up of other young adults, teenagers, and I think up to 25, who are super passionate about building wealth through investing, through real estate, through doing better with money. So if that's something that you're like, yeah, I'm one of those people who is really passionate and gung-ho about this, check it out. Where do they find that, Dan, if they're curious?
Just sheeksfreaks.com.
Okay.
Yep.
And you should see at the bottom of your reflection. And you
should
see at the bottom of your reflection sheet, there is a Instagram handle that you can reach out to Dan on if you ever have questions and you want to talk to him directly, or sheeksfreaks.com is the website. All right, let's get into the main part for today, the ultimate money hack for teens. So you are a personal finance teacher like myself. You've also worked in entrepreneurship education. You have a lot of investments in real estate. So very different to me. I invest mostly in stocks and index funds, but you're more so in the real estate side of things. But you were really passionate about helping teens to do better with their money. And this somehow culminated in this book that you brought out. But what is the ultimate money hack for teens? Let's go straight there. What is it?
Yeah, so it kind of goes down to this. So let me back up a little bit. So yes, I am a high school business teacher. I've been doing that for 20 years. And one of the classes I have taught over my career is personal finance. And for all the teachers out there listening, I think we would all agree that what we teach in personal finance class or similarly titled class, that stuff is really crucial for that young person becoming someone who's going to make smart money decisions in their future. And there's so much basic, like fundamental personal finance information that is very important to learn. And then you can build on top of that things like earning extra income through a side hustle, for instance, or how to save or how to invest. But what it really comes down to is if a young person doesn't have the understanding of how to manage their own personal finances first, then the savings, the investing, the extra income, or even the high income that might be coming in from a job, that isn't going to work very well. The foundation has to be there. And it goes back to that saying that I think we see on social media quite a bit that says, if you don't know how to manage $1,000, you are not going to know how to manage, let's say, $100,000. You have to have basic personal finance skills in place before you start increasing your income and building wealth. That is just a fact. You need to know how to manage money well. So the ultimate teen money hack, why I call it the ultimate, it's not about the higher level stuff, building extra income, building wealth, investing. It's about making sure that the teenagers, all of you students out there, that you actually know how to manage your money. And so in classes, we teach the different strategies, which is important. We might even practice those strategies, which is also very important. But there's nothing like actually doing it. And as close to real world as we can. So that's what the ultimate teen money hack is all about. It's about giving the teenager the freedom to manage their own money and sometimes make mistakes while they're living at home in the safety of their parents' household in high school. And so in a nutshell, and then I'll turn it back over to you, Rob, and then we can get into the details. But in a nutshell, what the ultimate teen money hack is, it's an agreement between a teenager and their parents or guardians that the teenager is going to be in charge of all of their finances. And in order to do that, so they're going to pay all of their bills while they're living in the household. And in order to do that, they have to have money. Well, normally the parents are paying for all of that. So what's going to happen, and this will get the attention of the teenager, the parents are going to give you a quote unquote paycheck on the first of every month. They're going to deposit that into your checking account. And that's going to be a substantial amount of money. It definitely varies by household and by teenager. But just to make it a nice, round, even number to play with, let's say it's $1,000 a month. So the parent is going to deposit $1,000 a month into the teenager's checking account. And then they are going to pay for all of their expenses using that money. And perhaps if they have a part-time job or let's say they're babysitting, they might have a little extra money coming in too, but they are responsible for paying all of their bills, all of their, all their expenditures and budgeting to do that correctly.
Okay.
So that's it in a nutshell. Yeah.
All right. So the teaser is the ultimate money hack is going to be teens taking control of the spending in their household that's happening for them. And we're going to talk about how you do that. But just going back to a couple of things you said, personal finance education. It's not about financial literacy. Like that is, how things work. What do words mean? How does our tax system work? What is a 401k? Like it's the low order. What is something, defining something? How do you do something? Personal finance education on the other side is all about, as Dan said, making smart money decisions, that you are going to use what you know to make decisions that are going to help you get towards your financial goals. And that's something that is really, really hard to do because talking about it in theory is very different to doing it in practice. And you will see a lot of personal finance, like Instagram or TikTok or any social media account that will talk about this, that it's all about your psychology behind the decisions you make, how hard it is when life starts throwing these weird curveballs at you. And now you have to really start making decisions under pressure, or you see a stock market falling and you're like, okay, do I stay? Do I hold what I'm doing? If the housing market is flying up, do I feel this panic that I have to get in and do something about it? Those are the real life money decisions. It's not the ones that we make on paper in class. And part of the problem is that most teenagers don't handle a lot of money. Many of you listening may have part-time jobs, which is great. You've got some income coming in, but you realize very quickly that you're making probably somewhere between maybe a couple of thousand and 10,000 a year, which is wonderful. It's a lot of money for you right now, but in the grand scheme of like an adult's finances, you're still not quite there yet with the full amount that you need to be handling. So Dan's idea is that, well, instead of trying to get you to earn more money and go spend more time working, which is not usually the most productive thing to do with your time right now, let's see, can we take control of some of the finances that our parents or our guardians are spending on us right now? So Dan, how do we do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've put a ton of research into this, and I've been talking about this strategy for quite a while. But normally, to be honest, I normally share it with parents. And my parent world title for this is the Ultimate Teen Money Hack for Parents. And I mostly deal with working with Gen Z, but I also have this other piece of my life where I help parents and train parents how to teach their kids about money. So if you're a student out there, this is absolutely something that you can take to your parents. And I really think you should, hear this plan out, listen to all the details, and then decide if this is something that you want to take with your parents and say, hey, mom and dad, like Rob said, I have a quick guide that you're going to get for free that outlines everything we're going to talk about today. I have a contract that you would then go over with your parents, and you both would sign it, agreeing that you're going to go down this path of using the strategy. But go to your parents and say, hey, I want to give this a try. I want to manage my own money in the household, because there is some work that your parents will have to do on the front end before you begin using the strategy. And what the biggest thing your parents have to do is they have to figure out how much do they actually spend on you. And that varies month to month. In the summer, you might have a sports camp that costs a few $1,000s. And you might have vacations where they're spending money for you to go on, your piece of the family vacation. Whereas in other months, there may not be much going on in your life where, they're not spending a lot of money on you. So the thing that parents have to do in the beginning is find out how much do they spend on you, the teenager, in a given year. And by the way, that number would probably blow you away and your parents away. It's going to be probably much larger than you think. And the way that they're going to do that is they're going to track their spending over at least 3 or 4 months to get a good idea of how much they spend. And then once they know how much they spend in a year, they can divide that by 12, and that's your paycheck that they're going to deposit into your bank account each and every month. And the reason I call it a paycheck is because when you're out in the real world, that's very much what happens. Your employer direct deposits a paycheck into your checking account, and then you go ahead and pay all of your bills, including spending money on some fun stuff and hopefully some money on savings and investings as well. So by doing this now, if you're a sophomore, junior, senior, or even a freshman, you're going to learn how to manage your money, learn how to manage your budget, learn how to save for future expenses that are, maybe it is that sports camp that happens once a year, but you need to save over the course of a few months to have enough to pay for that, or that other big expenditure that might be coming up. So to begin, you need to have a conversation with your parents and say, hey, let's all get on board. Let's figure out how much you spend on me and the monthly average, and you're going to pay me that money. And then you, the student, take it from there. And here's where it gets interesting, I think, right? And again, I've been talking about this for a while. I know families that do this, and it works really well. It's never perfect, and adjustments have to be made. But the lessons that are learned and the habits that are built by the teenager are real world habits that they will use out in the real world. So first and foremost, what I say in the outline, and and this is all flexible and adjustable depending on what the parents and teenager agree to. But this is like the default, right? So let's say that $1,000 goes into the bank account on the first of the month. The teenager now, according to their budget, they're going to start paying their bills. And what I recommend is that first, the teenager has to transfer back to the parents 30% of that, and that is your taxes. So $300 will go right back to the parent. And that's the one piece that's a little different, because normally if you got a paycheck, your taxes would already be taken out. So you would only get the $700 deposited into your account. But by having to pay that back to your parents, okay, parents, here's 30% in taxes going back to you. You kind of feel what that's like. I had $1,000, now I only have 700. And then the other bills start to come in, right? And so you are paying for everything, with one exception. The one thing that doesn't really work well is that, so not included in this plan is any food that the teenager eat in the house is still free and included. Your parents pay for that, because it's really hard to kind of itemize out. Like if you have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with 2 slices of bread and a tablespoon of peanut butter and a tablespoon, how much did that cost? And pay that to your parents. That's too hard. So food in the house is still like just included. That's not part of the plan. Everything else is open game. So what you also would probably transfer back to your parents on the first of the month is rent. And that's an amount that you would come up with your parents. So let's say that's $250 a month. You transfer that in a separate transaction back to your parents. And by the way, every time you're making a transfer or paying a bill, you're doing that online. You're clicking the mouse and you're actually learning what it feels like to pay bills, which is what you will need to do when you're off on your own after high school. So transfer back your rent, and then anything else that's in that budget that is, money that's going to be spent on you is coming out of that paycheck. So I suggest your share of the utilities, your car, if you have one, all the insurance, registration, gas, car washes, that's all coming out of the money that your parents give you, your clothing, your entertainment, any food that you eat outside of the house. If you go to a restaurant, if you go to lunch with your friends, you're paying for that out of that money. Even if you go to dinner with your family, let's say your family goes out to Chili's for dinner one night. The teenager is going to get a separate bill from the waiter. You're going to tell them, we want separate checks. And then the teenager gets their own check with only what they ordered on it. And they're going to use their debit card or even a credit card to pay for that, their meal and their meal only, because your parents have given you the money up front to pay for those things. A family vacation is another one. Let's say the family's going to go to Disneyland for a summer vacation. They're going to, embedded in those monthly paychecks is enough money to pay for your vacation. You just have to make sure that you're not spending it all, so that you have money saved for that family vacation when it comes. And you're going to pay your share of, transportation, so the flight, your share of the hotel room, all the food, souvenirs. You're going to pay for your ticket into Disney World or Land. I'm not sure what I said. And transportation, everything is coming out of your account, your budget. So if you do this over the course of a few months or even a couple of years, by the time you're done, you will absolutely, you being a teenager, will absolutely understand and have habits built, understand how do I manage money? How do I plan for big expenditures that I know are coming up? How do I save a buffer so that when something unexpected happens, and it will, I have that emergency fund to cover that expense? How do I actually go online and pay bills? And you'll have a habit set up that maybe once or twice a month, I have to sit down and pay my bills. I need to make transfers. I need to pay that, go to that company website and pay that bill before the due date. So again, I can get even more in the weeds, but I'm gonna pause there, Rob, and let you have any comments you want. That is the strategy with a little bit more detail. Let's just say that.
No, that was a lot of detail. And I definitely want to go back and make sure that's very clear what just happened there. So you, the teenager, are going to say, I want to take control of the spending that is happening on my behalf. And you mentioned that the first thing we're gonna have to do, and this is the one I want to really highlight, that before you start, parent or guardian is going to have to know roughly how much they're spending on you. And you can help them with this. So if you haven't done something like this already, do a 30-day cash flow tracker where you are tracking how much money you spend and where your money comes from. So income for 30 days, and encourage parents, guardians to do it as well with you. And then at the end, you can look at it with them and be like, okay, this is the amount that's being spent on me. This is what's being spent on the rest of the family. And I would like to start taking gradual control of the money being spent on me. And this is probably going to be a more gradual thing. There are some wheels that you can't just stop and switch it over to someone else straight away, but there are some things that you can start taking over right now. So like, I would say if you were going to do this, start small, particularly if this is the first time your parents have ever really started thinking about finances in any sort of structured way like this. Like if you have a parent at home who has no clue where their money is going and they're just kind of like flying by each month, things seem to be going okay, we're making it through, but I have no clue how much I'm spending or where it's going, they're going to have some work to do here as well to kind of get started. So start small, maybe be like, all right, parent, you're currently putting all the gas in my car right now. I know I fill up 4 times a month. I put about $30 in each time. So can I be in control of $120 of gas money? And you are no longer expected to put gas in my car. You give me the 120 and I will manage keeping my car filled with gas. And if I spend more than that, I'm going to have to find it because that was my allocation. I have overspent my budget. And if I underspend it, that's where some of the fun part can come in. What do you do, Dan, if you underspend or if you manage your money really well?
That's a great question, and I get that a lot. So from the parent, so the short answer is the teen gets to keep that money. You get your paycheck at the beginning of the month, and if you don't spend it all, and now it's tough to say that because by spending, you might also need to allocate some money off to the side for a future large expense that you know is coming, right? But if you do all of that and pay your bills and you have extra money, then that's yours. You get to keep it. From the parent's perspective, they're not losing anything. If they did their due diligence in finding out how much they're spending on their teen on average per month, then they're just giving that money. It would have been spent anyway. And so back to your point, Rob, I think on the parent side, and this would be a discussion that should happen between the teen and the parent when you begin. The parent, I think at a minimum, the parent and the student together need to track, like you said, the cash flow for that teenager for a minimum of 30 days. And I would really like to see that more like 3 to 4 months. An ideal world, it would be the parent doing it for the entire year. But you can get by with 1, 2, 3 months. But after you've done that and you analyze how much money has been spent on the teenager, you then need to think forward and say, what are things that didn't happen in this time frame, whether it was 1 or 2 months, that we know will happen, like the summer sports camp, or something else that happens once or twice a year but didn't happen to occur in that tracked time frame. And so once you kind of bring all that in, and again, it's going to be something that's going to be adjusted a few times within this strategy, and this is all in the quick guide. But I also recommend that at least once a month, the parent and the teenager sit down and have a meeting to go over everything that happened in that previous month. So, by the way, all the spending the teen does should be going through their checking account, even if it's Venmo or Apple Pay, it's all linked to that checking account, so that the parents can watch and observe and monitor everything as it's happening. So they still get to see all of the stuff the teenager spending money on, and they can interject when needed. Although I really urge the parent to let the teen make mistakes. If they're spending too much money, let them do that. So then at some point they'll come to a place where they need or want to buy something and they don't have enough money. That's a good lesson to learn now rather than later. And so that monthly meeting, the parent's going to look at where did the money go. The teenager's going to do the same thing. And at that point, a conversation can happen where, they might say, you know what, $1,000 a month is too much. You're ending up with way too much money, or it's not enough. Like, I can see, a parent might say, I can see by where you're spending your money that I need to give you probably $1,100, maybe $1,200 a month. I thought 1,000 was enough. It's not. So that gets adjusted and tweaked over time to where it's dialed in. But those conversations that happen in those monthly meetings, and even, throughout the month, those are valuable lessons where the teenager is learning how to manage their own money, and they're doing it, in a real world scenario.
And just for like some context, like there was a recent study done by Brookings Institute, which said that parents or guardians on average are spending about $18,000 a year on their teenagers, or $332,000 over the lifetime of a child from 0 to 17. So the cost of a child is about $300,000 over their lifetime. So if there's $18,000 being spent on you, can you now start taking control of some of that? That's $1,500 a month, by the way. Things like shared bills. A lot of us are probably on shared bills with our families for cell phone, for example. Can you now say, well, if it's a cell phone plan that has 4 cell phones on the plan, can we divide into 4, and you include in my monthly allowance the cell phone part, and then I will pay either my part directly to the cell phone company if that's possible, or I will pay it back to you when you go to pay the actual bill. There will feel like, it sounds like there'll be a lot of times where a parent is handing you money and then you are going to be just handing it back to them again. The difference is that you should get the money at the start of the month. You are maintaining it and you're making sure that you can pay all of those bills on whatever date that they are normally paid. So it's not like they hand you $200 and then you immediately just hand it back to them and be like, yep, this is all my bills for the month. The idea should be that you are paying the parent or guardian off each week or every couple of days to make sure that all those bills are being met as the adult is paying them off as well. And then eventually, if you can, start taking control to say, like, okay, let me get off the family share cell phone plan and let me get my own plan. Parents, you were paying $60 a month for me to be on a Verizon unlimited data plan. If I go switch to Xfinity Mobile and I go on a limited data plan, I can knock my bill down to $20. So if I do that, now I can pocket 40. You were going to spend 60 on me anyway. Let me save some of that money and reallocate it somewhere else. And then you're building up. As Dan said, you are building up to that point where you are now saying, let me take charge of really large things like we pay auto insurance once a quarter, or we pay our homeowners insurance once a year, whatever it is, and I'm going to take a percentage of that. So you have to hold that money over time. Clothing, I don't know about all of you, but for me, clothing, I spend money on clothes like 3 times a year. So it's not like I have a monthly clothing allowance. I budget for it, but I don't usually only spend it like once a quarter, summer and winter sort of thing. So you would have to kind of bank that money, hold on to it until it's time to go spend, and then go spend it. And if you can do it smartly and keep some of that money for yourself, well, now you can use that for saving, investing, funding other goals, that sort of thing. All right. So
yeah, I want to add on to that real quick, Rob. So you brought up a good point. A lot of the bills of the household it's just one bill for the whole family. Like you mentioned, the cell phone bill is a great example. And so, yeah, I would recommend in this plan that, basically the teenager pays if let's say there's 4 people in the household, 2 parents, 2 children, that they are then paying 25% of the cell phone bill. And then same with the utilities, if there's Netflix, if there's obviously internet, gas, electric, water, sewage, trash, they're paying 25% or whatever the right amount is, percentages for all of those utilities. And, another good example is a gym membership. Many times a family will have a family membership at a gym or something similar. I would just have them pay their share of that, but rather than take them off the family membership and have an individual membership. And the same might be true for a cell phone. I would still do whatever is most prudent to save money for the family. So if having the family cell phone plan saves the family the most money, then I would just leave it as such and have the teenager pay a percentage of that one bill. When you start breaking them off, it can get more expensive. So just, analyze both options and do whatever saves the most money overall, but have the teenager pay for their share.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Whatever is best for the family. But a lot of us don't ever actually look at our expenses and try and see, well, what was the best option? So if your family is doing something like a Verizon, a AT&T Sprint, like those major carriers, and you haven't looked at some of those smaller ones like Xfinity Mobile, like Chime, like any of those, maybe do that for your family. Like, be like, okay, we can save this amount of money if we switch this cell phone plan. If I save us this amount of money, can I have that as part of my budget? You're already willing to spend it anyway. So if I'm saving us money, let me take over the cell phone bill. So you take over the entire thing, and you pay it on behalf of the family. You could certainly do that.
I love that.
Okay, so let's shift now into potential challenges that we're going to face when we start approaching parents about this and how we might overcome those. The first one that I'm definitely thinking of is, what if my parents don't do particularly well with finances already? They're not the most financially savvy. Like, I know when I go home that money is not a pleasant conversation to have in our house. It's been a very taboo topic for a lot of households in the US. Many families have been struggling since COVID. How are we going to have a teenager go home and approach this if money is not a fun thing to talk about?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is that this plan is not going to work for every family situation. It's just not. But if the students out there, the teenagers who are listening, if you're listening to this and you're like, I think I want to do this, and I think you should at least give it a try. You should know enough about your parents and their financial situation and how money is or isn't talked about in your household to know, you're going to have to be a good negotiator. You're going to have to approach your parents in the right way. Probably a few of you could go to your parents tonight and sit down and say, hey, I heard about this plan. I want to do it. And they're going to be like, this is an awesome idea. I'm on board. And one discussion, and now we're all on the same page. But for most of you, it's going to take some phasing in, or it's going to maybe a series of discussions with your parents to kind of sell them on this idea, because there's going to be some work for them. And in some families, it just may never happen. But even if you phase in, or as Rob said earlier, maybe you just start with gas for your car, or maybe all the expenses for your car. And then you move on to maybe that plus eating out at restaurants with your friends and buying clothing. Like, anything's better than nothing, right? Pretty much 100% of teenagers out there go off into the real world having zero experience managing their own money, unless they have a part-time job and they buy some food and clothing and some video games with that. So even if you do some of this, you're going to be way better off than pretty much every other teenager out there. And if you can do all of it, even better. But I would say for each teenager, just, kind of gauge your family situation and how comfortable your parents are talking about money or with money, and start there, kind of feel them out with a conversation or two, see if they might be interested in doing something like this. Take the quick guide that we're going to give you. All the teachers will get the quick guide. It is on the worksheet as well. Take that, print it out, go over it with your parents, go over the contract with your parents, whenever you feel like the right time is to look at those two documents. And, the worst is they say no or not now, and, just keep bringing it up every once in a while.
And there's a couple of things I want to come back to there, but the first being that this might be a new experience for your family. Like, talking about money may never happen at all. There's a significant percentage of families who don't talk about money at all. So you bringing this up, an easy entry point, as Dan said, is, hey, mom, dad, whoever, in class today, we had this guest speaker come in, Dan Sheeks. He was talking about maybe me taking control of some of the spending that's happening on my behalf. I realized that, we don't really talk much about money. I'd love to know a little bit more about that. And then, is there something small that I could start taking control over? It's a very kind of easy, gentle entry point for a lot of people, particularly if they're not sure about it, if they don't trust you. So trust is a big thing here. Like, the parent guardian is going to have to believe that you are going to be responsible enough to handle this money and treat it wisely. Because if I were the parent, the last thing I would want is to hand $1,000 to my child. They go blow it on video games, and they come back to me and be like, yeah, I don't have money for clothes. I don't have gas for my car. I need to get to my job. And I feel kind of cornered into like, well, I need them to do those things. I need them to have clothes on their back. So I'm going to end up forking out more money again. We don't want to blow this opportunity. So start small. build it up very gradually. And Dan has mentioned this contract, and I want you to find that resource right after this call ends. The contract is what you're going to approach the parent or guardian with. And you're going to say, this is the agreement we're going to go with. You are going to give me access to, maybe let's talk about gas money. So $120 on the first of every month. And I will be fully responsible for all the gas in my car during that time. So if you're an older student who's driving, this is perfect for you. If you're younger, it could be a clothing budget. Let's give me $50 a month that I can spend on clothing, and you are no longer responsible for buying me clothing again. That is my clothing budget, and I will make that work. And see, can you get them to agree to something small like that, and demonstrate over the course of a month, couple of months, that you can manage that money effectively. And then after a month, 2 months, 3 months, go back to them again. Let's do a new contract. Now, can I start taking responsibility for the cell phone bill as well? Can I add in some restaurant budget? So if we go out to eat once a month, we know roughly how much we spend. Like, can I now have my part of that? And I will be responsible for buying my own meal at the restaurant. So before we get there, you got your cash or digital stuff ready to go. They've got theirs, and you are now on separate checks, and you get to decide for yourself. So you can order the steak, or you can order the appetizer and keep it as expensive or cheap as you want. And in doing so, you get to manage that money. Because as Dan said, this is about you practicing. The only way we get good at stuff is to practice. And what happens with most adults is they don't get to practice until they hit their late teens, early 20s. And at that point, most already have taken out way too much in student loans. They've possibly bought their first home and not really done the homework as to what they could have afforded. They bought a new car and they've got a massive car payment. And we didn't have that practice. So we made some really bad decisions in our early 20s that you now have to spend the rest of your 20s trying to unwind and fix before you can really start building wealth. So if we can practice now, it's going to make a huge difference as you go into those major wealth building years of your life, where your income is going to go up dramatically. And you're going to have this huge opportunity to save, invest, and do all the things that are going to get you on a path to financial independence.
Yeah, and you brought up a good, Rob, a good situation or scenario that could happen, and that is the teen runs out of money. So let's say they're responsible for budgeting for some or all of their expenses. What happens when the teen overspends? Maybe they bought too much, fun stuff. They splurged and bought a bunch of video games or some new clothing, and it really wasn't in their budget, but they bought it anyway. What happens then when the teen says, I don't have enough money in my account to pay, rent, or to put gas in my car, or maybe to go on the family vacation? It comes up and the parents are like, okay, your share of this vacation is X amount for the flight, hotel, whatever. And the teen says, well, I didn't budget well enough. I don't have that money. We don't want to cancel the vacation. So what do we do in those situations? And I recommend that, first of all, the parent lets the teenager make that mistake, because the best way we all learn is by learning from our mistakes. I can tell you to budget, but until you do it and figure out for yourself, the consequences of not budgeting correctly, you're not going to really learn how to do it. So first of all, let the teenager make mistakes. And then if they are out of money and they need it for something, I think the best fix for that is that the parent says, okay, you are short $300 for the family vacation. I'm going to loan you $300. I'm going to transfer it into your account. But at the end of the month, or maybe it's a payment system, you're going to pay me back that money plus a little interest. Negotiate that with your parents so that you learn what it's like to basically have to bail yourself out. You didn't have an emergency fund set aside. You didn't save up correctly. Now you have to take out a short-term loan, pay a little interest. So you're going to have to adjust your budget, because they're not going to, they might, but the idea is they don't, if the money was there and you just spent it frivolously, they're not going to increase how much you get each month. They're just going to give you that one-time loan. You need to pay it back. So you have to redo your budget to account for those loan payments going back. So you may have to be a little more frugal in the few months after that. But what a great lesson to learn. Hey, I need to be diligent. I need to always be thinking forward about where my money needs to go before I spend on my wants.
No, it is a wonderful lesson. And also bear in mind, if you don't know when your parents' paychecks come in, that's something that you might want to think about as well, because the money will be available for doing something like this when a paycheck comes in, because that's when everyone's budget either restarts or continues on. So in my case, like I get paid the first of the month and the halfway point, so the 15th of the month. So those would be two great starting points for a teenager of mine to start doing something like this. Probably the first of the month, like most people, if they budget, do so on a monthly basis. So the start of the month is a great natural stopping point. If your family doesn't budget, so they don't have any sort of spending plan, you can take what you're learning in class and say like, hey, we're talking about this thing in class, this budgeting thing. Would you like to try and do this together as a family? I would love to learn using our experience as well. So you're not coming in from this like up here, like I'm going to tell you how it is. We're going to budget because I know how to do everything right now. Nobody really likes to be dictated to, particularly parents from their kids, as I'm sure many of you know. So come at it from this point of view of teamwork. Here's what I'm learning about right now. I want to learn more. I want to practice. Let's do this together and learn together. I want to switch into the Q&A part of this call. So if you are watching this and you have a question for Dan or me about this ultimate money hack for teens, put it into the chat or in the Q&A feature, and I'll definitely try and get it asked if it's not been asked already or answered in some way. I may paraphrase a couple of questions together to kind of hit them as well. But the first one that I see is from Deborah, and she asked, do you have a family money meeting before you start this, or do you do it after you've kind of maybe gone through a month of doing it?
Both. So we kind of touched on this, but communication and conversations around money have to be a very intricate part of this entire strategy, whether you're going all in or just kind of phasing in. Conversations have to happen up front. They have to happen, while you're signing the contract and deciding the details. And then they need to happen at least, if not more often, at least monthly, going through the strategy as the teenagers doing the ultimate teen money hack. So, and honestly, families that have used this, they kind of say it just the fact that they're employing this strategy tends to make those conversations happen. So, and they kind of happen more spontaneously. So maybe you're driving to the grocery store and, parent asks the teen, hey, what do you want? What do you want me to buy so you can have food in the house? And the teenager says, oh yeah, this is so great that I still get the food in the house for free. And then it just kind of, the conversation goes from there. Or at the dinner table or on the way to soccer practice, conversations around money and gas, because the teenager is going to start to learn, gas prices fluctuate. Let's talk about that. Or restaurant prices are going up because of inflation. Maybe that's a different conversation. So conversations have to be embedded in this strategy from the very get-go, and they need to happen like set meeting dates, but then they also happen more spontaneous too.
Okay, and the next one comes from Kelly, who wants to know about insurance and asked about health insurance and whether you would bake this into the strategy.
Mm-hmm.
I think it could go for any insurance in general. So maybe something like health insurance, life insurance, car insurance. Would you do it from the beginning? Like, would you say, okay, let's take the insurance bill, divide it based on the number of people or how much it was to add a kid to your insurance plan? Or would you keep that for a later date?
So there's again, the plan is completely flexible and the parent can do whatever they wish to do. So if you're going to include, let's say, medical insurance, health insurance, dental insurance, vision, like anything like that, hopefully you can find out, how much of that insurance premium is based on the teenager themselves, and then charge them that per month. But then again, you're giving them that money through the paycheck at the beginning of the month so that they do have the money to pay for that. So if you are going to have them pay for their insurance, then the paycheck also goes up the same amount. Or you could, every parent can do how they want. You can just say, I'm still going to cover all your insurance. I'm going to pay your insurance bills for you. And because I'm doing that, I'm not going to include that in the paycheck, the monthly stipend that you get every month. So everything is open, for debate and can be included or not.
Okay. Marwa asked about multiple streams of income and what happens now if you are a entrepreneurial teen and you want to increase your personal income, but you're kind of like, well, I don't want the free ride to end over here either. Like, how do I negotiate that? Like where I want to increase my own income, but I don't necessarily want it to just be absorbed. I don't want my parents to just take back money and be like, okay, you're making your own now. You can still cover the same bills. This sort of de-incentivizes me to make more money if I'm just going to end up spending the same bills anyway. So how would you navigate that?
That's a good question. So it needs to be part of the conversation up front. Let's say the teenager has a part-time job right now and they're making $400 a month. Well, in the conversation, the parent and the teenager need to decide, is the $400 a month that I make now on average per month, is that going to be all included in my stipend? So if my parents were going to give me 1,000, now they're only going to give me 600, or does the teenager get to keep all of that for their wants and their fun stuff, or maybe some 50-50 or something like that? That needs to be the conversation when you sign the contract to begin. Where is that money going? How is it allocated? Once it's in place, and let's say the teenager then gets a different job and they increase their rate of pay, now they're making $700 or $800 a month. In that conversation, or in that point in time, the conversation needs to come back around. Do we use the same percentage, 50-50, or does the parent allow them to keep all of that money to put towards whatever they want? It really is it's a decision that should be made between the teen and the parent. If it were me, and I have a son, but he's not old enough for this yet, I would incentivize my teenager to work and earn more, and I wouldn't want to take the incentive away. So I would probably let them keep most, if not all of that money to use as they wish.
Yeah, I think I would do the same. And I like what you said about parents, guardians will cover your needs, and then you are more in charge of your wants. And if you can manage that, that's going to be a great way of doing it. So as you make more money, you get to buy more things you want. It's great. And then your core needs, like your food, your transportation, your housing, those are all covered by parents still. Okay, so we had a question from Jody about what happens if your family is larger. So it's a little bit easier maybe when there's one child or 2 kids, but what about these very large families, like maybe 7 kids? Is it any different in terms of trying to figure out your share?
Yeah, it becomes much more difficult to come up with an exact amount that's spent on any one particular child, because maybe the parents buying things in bulk, or maybe they're some of the expenses of the household just are kind of more for everybody. So to take 1/7 or 1/8 of that becomes more difficult. That is a challenge that larger families are going to have. But it's still doable. I've worked with families who maybe they don't have 7 kids, but 3 or 4 or 5 kids that are making it work. And again, it's not about getting it perfect. It's not about finding the exact amount that should be paid to the teen every month. What it is about is the teenager having responsibility for managing their own money, paying bills on time, saving for future large expenses, coming up with an emergency fund, and in the budget for the teenager, there should be the first line item should be paying yourself first. So the teenager should be taking a percentage of that and putting it towards their future self, either in a savings account or perhaps even investing it, to get that habit built at a very early age. So yes, more difficult with larger families, but still doable. It just takes a little more work.
I like that you talked about pay yourself first, because that comes straight into our next question. Rashad is asking now more from the parent perspective than the teen perspective. So teens, pay attention to this. This is maybe a question that your parent might have. Wants to know about saving and investing. Do I dictate that part of their money has to go into savings or investing, or maybe a 5-9 plan for college, or do I let them figure it out for themselves? Because if I'm afraid that if I give them a piece that is meant to include savings, but it's really their choice how much they save, what happens when they spend it all and they're not doing any saving? Should I then be stepping in to say, no, you have to put 10% into savings, that's a non-negotiable. You have to put some into your Roth IRA if you're making money, or do I let them figure it out for themselves?
Good question. First, I have the chat open on my screen here as well. And if that is the Rashad that I know down in Texas, I believe. Hey, Rashad, shout out to you. Yeah, so Rashad's question is a good one. It goes back to these early conversations when setting up the strategy. as a parent, it kind of, I think it depends a little bit on the age. If you're dealing with, let's say, a freshman, sophomore, maybe you go a little bit lighter on requiring them to put more money in future investments like a Roth IRA or a college fund. As they get a little bit older, maybe you amp that up a little bit. That's a question I haven't thought of much. I think if the parent is very money wise and financially literate and they're good with their money, they're probably going to just say to the teen, I'm going to pay you a little bit extra, but in your budget, that needs to go towards your future investments. Whether that's some kind of a Roth IRA, index fund, brokerage account, college fund, something like that. And that's probably what I would recommend. If you, the parent, are putting money away for their college fund, let's say, and if you're putting it into a college fund that has tax incentive, then you probably should do that because you, the parent, have to do that. But if you want to give them some extra money to invest in their future, then build that into the paycheck, but then also tell them that needs to be part of your budget. And since the parent is monitoring at least monthly, if not more often, where the money's going, because if a teenager has a checking account, it's probably a joint checking account that was set up with the parent. So the parent can log in and see all the debits and credits and see where that money, are they saving enough? And by the way, part of this should be the teenager should have the checking account and a savings account, if not a couple of savings accounts. So the parent can monitor the money in the savings account growing for emergency fund, for future expenses, for future investments. And if the parent is seeing that the money isn't going where it's supposed to, then you need to intervene and have a conversation with them. So I would say it's up to the parents, but if you trust the kid and you think they're going to follow through, then give them the autonomy to save and invest for their future.
I like that answer. I know for my son, he's 3, we just started an allowance and there's no expectation of saving yet. Where you start is you learn to spend, you learn then say, like, I want to buy something that costs more than what I make on a weekly basis. So by that thought process, he's naturally starting to save. So we're talking like 4 to 7 week saving kind of stretches, and then he buys the thing he wants. And that will build up eventually to, oh, there's some really big goals out here that you might want. Let's start saving up for those as well. Same thing with giving and charitable donation. Like that's something that should be part of every person's budget. Like there should be categories for all of those. And then you should decide how much goes into each one. One thing Dan said that is very important though, is that you need to have all of these things in place. So all teenagers, you should have a checking account and a savings account, and ideally multiple savings accounts so that you can put money into different places for different goals. If you don't have these things yet, if you're under 18, you will have what's called a custodial account, which is where you open an account with an adult also named on it. You are co-owners of the account, but as soon as you turn 18 or in some states 21, the adult falls off of the account and you become the sole owner of it. Check with your local banks if you are looking for like free savings accounts. I love some of the online banks like Ally Bank. They let you just kind of open up like up to 10 and you can use it for different saving goals and there's no fees with it. Make sure when you open your accounts, no fees, easy to access. And then you've got some of the features that we need like mobile banking where you can send money to parents or guardians easily, pay for things digitally, that sort of thing. All right. Next question comes from Derek. And this one I'm going to kind of warp a little bit. He said, should we do the hack if parents are not good with money? And we kind of talked about this a little bit already, but if our parents are not very good at handling money, how would you enter this conversation and how would you, like, what could we try and take control over? So I do have a thought about this, but I want to hear yours first.
Yeah, that's tough. So I think the short answer would be probably not a good idea to do the strategy with parents. I mean, there's a spectrum, right? Some parents are great, some parents have no idea, and most are in between. So somewhere along that spectrum, as you get over to the side where the parents are just not good with money, there you do reach a tipping point where this strategy would probably not work. Because if the parents aren't at least somewhat comfortable and familiar and responsible for the finances of the household, then it could be a parent that says, okay, I'm going to give you $1,000 a month, but then 3 months down the road, they say, well, I don't have that. So I'm only going to give you $500 this month. Well, now the teen's not really learning good lessons, right? And they're not able to pay the bills that they should pay. So yeah, if you happen to be a teenager whose parents are just not good with money, then what I would do, honestly, to help your family out is take what you're learning in your classes and the lessons from this strategy, even though you may not employ it, and start having conversations with your parents. Not, don't do it in a, you don't want to send the vibe that I, the teenager, know more about money than you, the parent, because no one's going to receive that message. But in a helpful, conversational, maybe more inquisitory way, have conversations with your parents about the things you're learning now, and try to help them out and teach them some of the basics that maybe you're learning in class. Because it's not their fault, by the way. Our country is financially illiterate in general, because most teenagers, and our parents, believe it or not, were at one point teenagers. They didn't learn about money in school. And if they didn't have parents that taught them money skills, then they were just like most people, kind of learning by trial by fire out in the real world. There are a few teenagers, most who are listening to me talk right now are included, who are lucky enough to learn about personal finance in high school. But the majority of teenagers in our country still do not have that education in high school. It's changing slowly, but still not there. So help your parents out if they need it, I guess.
Yeah. And I think if the scenario is that there's not enough money in your house to cover all the bills, like that's a different one to like your parents are bad at managing money. If they're not great at managing money, still go to them with a contract and see, can you get your slice before the month starts, before the spending starts? So if you can get your piece in the beginning, they'll spend whatever's left and they'll make it fit into whatever their goals are, but at least you'll have carved out your piece before you start, and then you can go manage that. So that's probably something that could happen in a lot of households. Now, if there are bills upon bills stacked up, things aren't getting paid, there's medical debt, there's credit card debt, this is probably not going to be a great strategy for you to do right now. But if you can start getting involved in those household finances in some way, go for it. And if you have to, go start making your own money and start budgeting for yourself with what you have. But the main point of this ultimate money hack is that you are practicing managing money. All right. So Dan, before we wrap up, what is your number one piece of advice for teens to build wealth in the future?
I get asked that all the time. And the answer is for me an obvious one. And that is, I mentioned it before, pay yourself first. In my book, First to a Million, I talk about a lot of different strategies, but that, in my opinion, is if there's one takeaway from my book, it is that concept of paying yourself first. In order to build wealth, it does not happen without consciously and intentionally taking money out of your income every month, setting it aside for the future. And saving and investing that money for the future. So that would be the one strategy that I think is the most important, that students can learn in a personal finance class, that people can read or learn who are reading my book. And honestly, most adults, because most adults don't use that one strategy either.
It's a great one. All right, so let's wrap it up today. Just to recap, the ultimate money hack for teens is that you start taking control of the money being spent on your behalf in your household. Use the contract that is linked in your student reflection document. It'll also be emailed out to everyone who registered for this webinar. So if you are sitting in a classroom right now, your teacher should get it very quickly once we finish, and probably in the next day or so again. And see, can you ratify, so adjust this contract for your family situation. And Dan, actually, I don't know if the one you gave us is editable, but we might create an editable one and send that out as a follow-up if we need to. But you can always just create your own version of this. You can do it on a piece of paper, on a napkin. It doesn't matter, as long as you're saying, I'm responsible for this. This is how much I'll get paid at the start of every month. This is what I have to do with it. And we will revisit this arrangement whenever, and we'll have a meeting about it whenever. So those are your key things you want to include. I
want to say real quick, Rob, to all the students out there, if you are one of those exceptional few who are super motivated about maximizing your financial future, please reach out to me. I have a lot of free stuff I can give you, some other resources. Best way to do that is to DM me on Instagram. My Instagram is dsheeks, all one word, dsheeks, the letter D Sheeks. DM me and let's connect. You can ask me questions there as well.
And just like every guest speaker, guys, they are inviting you to connect. Take advantage of that. Send a message, be like, hey, I saw you speak today. Really like this part. I have this question, and start building your network in that way. And if you are interested in doing something like the Sheeks Freaks group, where you want a mastermind, a group of people who are all trying to build wealth just like you, check it out. See if it's something that would be right for you or not. Coming up in the next month, we have money and mental health with Ed Combs. So how does our mental health impact our finances, how we spend money, how we save money, and all the stuff that comes with that? Should be really interesting. That's later this month. And let us know what you thought. So when you see this video come out on YouTube, leave a thought in the comments section. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, what you'd like to see in the future. And thank you all for being here today. Dan, thank you for your time.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Bye now.